Well, some of you that have long memories past last week, remember we are starting now year number 2 in 2 Corinthians, and we finished up chapter 8 a couple weeks ago, and chapter 8 was devoted to the offering. Chapter 9 is going to be devoted to the offering again, and it's not as long, and one of the questions we'll ask is he repeating himself, and what does that imply, or what does that matter? But as I was thinking about this yesterday, and I've sort of written it out on the front page, getting into it section. The Christian faith is profoundly other-centered. I mean, when Jesus was asked the greatest commandment, part of his answer was, "You will love your neighbor." And I think over and over in the certainly the epistles of Paul, but in all of the witnesses of how the faith developed from Jesus on in the New Testament, the sense you get again and again and again is that to be a follower of Jesus is to be concerned about the other person more than you're concerned about yourself. And I mean, that's a part of what it's part of what Christ was about. Who emptied himself, took the form of a servant, gave himself away for the sake of our salvation and our redemption. And that we're called upon to become imitators of Christ and to follow him in that regard and become more interested in others than we are in ourselves. And as I was thinking about the offering and why in the world would Paul spend 2 full chapters of this letter working on this offering issue? And I don't know that Paul consciously thought all this, I don't know. But it struck me, this is a key lesson on his part in helping a church that's used to being self-centered to start becoming other-centered. There were folks in Judea and Jerusalem, brothers and sisters in Christ, who apparently were hungry, malnourished. That leads to illness and premature death. Those kinds of things are happening in the life of brothers and sisters in Christ. And Paul wanted this church at Corinth to think outside of themselves and their concerns into the lives of other people. And I think maybe that's the reason he gives the kind of energy and attention he gives to this offering. It's a chance to care about somebody else and to learn how central and important that is in one's life. So, we're ready to take into chapter 9, and I'd like someone to read the first 5 verses out loud for us.
Could I just say one thing there, that other-centered, the first few chapters here have been about them.
Yeah.
And Paul, their feelings and their likes and their dislikes, and has been very self-centered up to this point.
Yeah.
Been the whole theme of it.
Trying to get them straightened out. For what purpose?
To be other-centered.
Yeah, so they can turn from themselves to turn outward, I think. There are folks who give a lot of attention to the full expression of Jesus' teaching. Love your neighbor as yourself, and there are folks who give a lot of energy to the idea you ought to love yourself first. I suspect that may be a reflection of contexts. I've never had any trouble loving myself. I don't need that advice to get that worked on. My advice, my need is to get past that. But I understand some folks come with experiences that damage their capacity to respect themselves and to care, give self-care and those kinds of things, and perhaps they need to hear that. And maybe that's what was happening with the church at Corinth. They were damaged enough in their own self-understanding that he needed to work on fixing them or helping them come to understand their relationship and have their relationships that were conflicted opened up and resolved in order to turn outward to the churches in Judea. Okay? Yeah. Okay? Now, surely someone is ready to read verses 1 to 5.
Now it is not necessary for me to write to you about the ministry to the saints, for I know your eagerness, which was the subject of my boasting about you to the people of Macedonia, saying that Achaia has
Achaia.
been, I'm sorry, what is it?
Achaia.
Achaia has been ready since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. But I am sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you may not prove to have been empty in this case, so that you may be ready, as I said you would be. Otherwise, if some Macedonians come with me and find that you are not ready, we would be humiliated, to say nothing of you, in this undertaking. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to go on ahead of you and to arrange in advance for this bountiful gift that you have promised, so that it may be ready as a voluntary gift and not as an extortion.
So why is it not necessary for Paul to write them about this?
He thinks they're ready, but he hopes they're ready.
Okay.
He doesn't want to be embarrassed.
All right, all that's the case, but that would make it necessary for him to write, wouldn't it? He says in verse 1 it's not necessary for him to write.
Well, it's just in case.
Well, one possible answer is he already wrote in chapter 8, so he doesn't need to write again. Don't know. How much of what you find in these first 5 verses do you say, no, I think he already covered that in chapter 8? Quite a bit of it, if not all. If there's anything new, it's just a little detail here or there, or perhaps in a reason why he doesn't come with the brothers. We'll get to that momentarily. Just one of the, I'll call it oddities of the history of interpretation. There have been folks who thought that chapter 8 and chapter 9 were originally 2 separate letters, and they got pasted together in the construction of 2 Corinthians. And I think you can see part of the reason they might think that theory might arise because of the repetition of stuff. Somebody's already mentioned a good reason why you would repeat things, though, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a second or a separate letter, and that's you just want to make sure. Or you're not sure they got the message, and so you want to come around and hit it again. Some of you have taught, been teachers, career teachers. How important is repetition in the process of learning?
You have to say it at least 3 times before they even know what page to turn to.
You have to do what, 3
You
times?
have to say it at least 3 times, the instructions. Please turn to page 52. Okay, for those of you that were just kind of listening, page 352. Okay, for those of you that are just now buying a clue, please, turn to page 352.
And in case you didn't hear that.
Yeah, so you have to say
Wow.
it at least 3
But
times.
to actually learn something, you need to have been touched with it and at least 21 times.
Yeah.
21
Yeah.
times.
Yeah,
Right,
21
yeah.
times.
That's why there are always 21 problems on my math assignments? Somebody should have told Paul, we've only got to repeat it twice here.
I know, you need 3.
No wonder they didn't get it, because there are evidences in a letter written from the Bishop of Rome, Clement, to the church at Corinth in 95 AD. There's hints they hadn't gotten some of Paul's messages yet. He didn't repeat it enough times, I guess. Okay. So I don't know that the repetition is any indication of anything other than the intensity of the importance of this message in his mind. Okay. So what is he communicating in the first 2 verses?
You almost wonder if it's reverse psychology in this thing. He keeps talking about, I know your eagerness,
Okay.
okay? And you wonder, are they really that eager, or is he just encouraging them to be eager?
Could be. What does he say about their eagerness? Is he the only one who knows about it?
No, he's been talking to other people about it.
He's been telling folks in Macedonia about their eagerness. Okay?
He wants to make sure they still have it.
Well, now they kind of have to live up to it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He's giving them hope.
And pressure.
Your zeal has stirred up most of them. What does most of them tell you?
Some of them are not convinced yet.
It tells you this is a church. So you got, yeah, most of them were on board, but apparently some of the Macedonians were hanging onto their pockets too, and suspicious of the call for an offering. You know. Okay?
So he's using them as an example to the Macedonians.
All right. But what is it what is the example that the Corinthians are? An example of,
Generosity.
not yet, eagerness, planning, talking, but not yet finishing, which is where he now comes back to say, okay? Verse 3, I'm sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you may not prove to have been empty in this case. Yeah, well, maybe that's part of it, which he'll say in more detail, I think, in the next verse.
Sending the brothers to you.
No, this is not the Mafia brothers. This is the brothers that we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Remember the one who was well known in the gospel, and there was this series of folks he was sending as kind of the accountability that the offering would be taken care of and handled very, very well, all that. So he's sending the brothers, but he mentions, apparently the brothers are going in front of Paul, but he's sending this message first, probably with the brothers, this letter with them, so that our boasting about you may not prove to be empty, so that you may be ready, as I said you would be. In other words, has your eagerness turned into generosity? Or have you talked a good game of this would be a great plan, and it just sort of petered out? Yeah. Does that ever happen in the life of the church? Well, otherwise, if some Macedonians come with me and find you're not ready, what will happen? First of all, Paul says we, himself. Who else is in the we of verse 4?
Probably the brothers he's talking
The people of Corinth are going to be,
in
The
embarrassed.
church.
uh-oh, we didn't do it. Shame.
Well, we would be humiliated, to say nothing of you. So maybe it's the whole apostolic team that we've talked about off and on through this letter. He does certainly have the Corinthians in mind. Will be humiliated. Why would they be humiliated?
Because he bragged on them.
Well, it's like having a party and you tell your guests, yeah, the house is clean, and then you bring them to the house and it's not so clean. And that's kind
Okay.
of what you've got here. I mean,
Okay.
Paul's boasting and saying that things are looking pretty good in Corinth, but probably not good enough to bring guests in.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think my mother would be humiliated
But is this
if I brought
more,
anybody into my house.
is this more than personal humiliation? He's saying your witness here is important. I've been telling them how eager you are in the Lord, maybe about an offering,
Yeah.
but that they want, that the church in Corinth is eager to serve God and to be pleasing in God's sight. And your witness to the Macedonians is critical.
Okay. Okay. Mark?
Are there any scholars or writers who have said that it could be interpreted that Paul is manipulating the Corinthians here?
Oh, I think there's a lot of it that have said that. Yeah, I want to, and I've said that. I had a new thought this week. It's in one of the questions next somewhere. This is an honor-shame culture. What does that mean?
Save face is really important.
Well, it depends. It may be in your case. I don't know. Most Americans are not. Most of American culture is not honor-shame culture. There are some, particularly if you've got Mediterranean background, there may be some, and there's a few others that picked it up. Who knows how they picked it up? But where people are shamed, devalued, feel themselves of no worth when they fail to meet the honor standards of whatever the expectation is. And so perhaps Paul is manipulating, or perhaps he's trying to protect some folks from the kind of social, emotional, if I want to call it decompression and crashing that happens when you realize that either personally or corporately as the church, you've had this responsibility and you've been bragged about and you fail to live up to it. And you've been essentially two-faced. There are folks, I think, for whom the discovery that they're two-faced is no big deal. But there's others for whom that's devastating. I had a major spiritual failure in my life, a couple years out of seminary. And probably as devastating as anything else was the awareness that I had done what I had done when I had never conceptualized myself as being a person capable of doing something that bad. And my sense of confidence and worth, of meaning anything, of having any future for ministry or anything was just devastated. I don't know if the Corinthians would have felt that or not. But being humiliated may have manipulative purposes, but that sort of assumes a kind of healthy kind of concept that we bear and a cultural that we bear. It may have been a protection for them, for the kind of devastation that would turn them back in on themselves again, in which they just, we're worthless.
Give up.
Yeah, that kind of, don't know.
Weren't we talking, I don't know how many years ago, about their culture at that time? I think it was about the Jews you were talking about. Their identity was seen through the group and not through the
Oh, yeah.
individual.
Yep.
Would the Gentiles in Corinth have also been a part of that, or I get the feeling that they were more independent than that? Is that wrong?
I think their culture is every bit as much, the technical term is dyadic or group-oriented. The issue is, what's the group?
This group?
Yeah, what's the group? Now, Judaism's group was well identified and understood. In a certain sense, I think you can understand what we might call now discipleship as trying to form an identity of the Christian community. And the Christian community is an other-centered community. And the folks at Corinth are coming out of several different groups where their identity is.
They wouldn't have been similar even.
Maybe not. They all have that group sense of identity, but it's not the same group. And he's trying to form them in the community of Christ group and to create that new corporate identity.
And a new guilt.
New guilt?
The new guilt for not.
No, guild with a D. Yeah, I think that's an important point too. Judaism had this sense of identity as the group. Paul wants the early church to have a sense of identity as the group. But when you're not multi-generational in a group yet, and these are all first-generation believers, there's a process by which you begin to develop that new identity. Yeah, that's important too. Which is a reason I suspect that he wants this offering thing to go well, because it's going to contribute to that sense of this is who we are. We are the people who give, kind of thing.
I wonder how the churches in Macedonia and the Corinthians, I guess, look at each other. Do the Macedonians look to the Corinthians as role models in general, or just maybe in this case because Paul talked them up? And how fragile are the Macedonians spiritually, so if Corinth would fail, it would be really harmful to them? Or, I mean, I'm thinking it's like Philippi and Thessalonica, they're probably pretty healthy churches anyway.
Our sense is the church of Philippi is a very healthy, strong church. Thessalonica, we're not so sure. From 1st, 2nd Thessalonians, we know they had, the issue he writes them about is misunderstandings and obsessions with second coming kinds of stuff. They were folks out in white sheets sitting in the trees waiting for the second coming to happen.
Can you repeat that last sentence?
Probably not.
I missed it.
The Thessalonians were folks who had this, who'd become obsessed with the second coming. So much so that a group of them who were considered themselves deeply spiritual were waiting for the second coming and not working anymore. The white sheets is a reference back to the Millerites
See, I missed that.
in the 1840s in this country, who had a date set for the second coming in, I think, October something in 1843, and who quit work and the night before wrapped themselves in sheets to look like angels or ghosts or something, and went out and sat on the roofs and the trees waiting for the second coming. I won't mention the denomination that now is a part that came from that. But part of what Paul said to the Thessalonians, if you don't work, you don't eat. And you don't say, hey, you people who aren't spiritual, feed us while we wait for the second coming. So whether the church at Thessalonica was really healthy or not, maybe that was their only glitch, and they understood and learned well. And it's hard to say how the two bodies sort of relate to each other. According to Acts, the church in Macedonia is established first. So they might have the sense of priority, or we were the leaders in this part of what used to be Greece. On the other hand, if you go back to the Greek city-states, these are the two rivals, Macedonia and the area down around Athens and Corinth. So he may be appealing to some deep-seated historic rivalry.
If they can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, so
Yeah, the Macedonians gave out of poverty.
deep poverty, he says in chapter 8. Yeah. Well, so I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to go on ahead to you, and to arrange in advance for this bountiful gift that you have promised. So why is Paul not coming with the brothers?
Giving them time to get ready, I guess.
Yeah, in other words, apparently there are Macedonians traveling with Paul, and so he wants an advance unit to go make sure this is all in order before the folks from Macedonia who are with him arrive there and find out, this boasting, this enthusiasm at Corinth was all talk and no action. He wants to help them not be embarrassed at that point. Elbow?
I think it's because of the political season, but I've been thinking about not meaning what we say. We get carried away and say, oh, this politician is just blowing smoke. Then when you rationalize it, well, they're doing that because all politicians do that. Then I think politicians do that because we don't mean what we say. And if you just listen to people talking, we exaggerate all of it. I just did. Don't exaggerate all the time, but we exaggerate a lot of the time. And Paul says, we would be humiliated to say nothing of you. Well, right there, he's saying something about them while he's saying to say nothing of you. And you compare that with, I think it was Jesus who said, let your yes be yes, your no, no. Maybe it's somewhere else. It's in the book somewhere.
Matthew 5:37.
The words of Christ, maybe?
Yeah.
No. I'm tempted to say, well, you're making a big to-do about almost nothing. If that's so, then what did Christ have in mind when he seemed to say, be careful what you say, just say what you mean, don't say yes, yes, when yes is
Words mean things. Words mean something.
It looks like Paul didn't get the message.
Could be.
Oh.
Yes.
I look at this in possibly two ways. One is this is a good management model. If you're trying to get a task done, these are some of the steps that you take. The other way to look at it is he's trying to make a good impression on the Macedonians, And when they get there and the offering is there and everything, see, I do it all the time. This was just slick as can be. Maybe that's a good management model too, I don't know.
Well, for the Macedonians to have given out of that deep poverty, and then the Corinth people aren't, then the Macedonians are gonna maybe go inward and go, why did we do that? They might not ever give it.
Or lost faith, that's a more important
Lost
thing.
faith.
Maybe Paul was wrong to have bragged about the eagerness of the Corinthians to start with. I don't know. But at any rate, he finds himself in a spot where he doesn't want the unity of the church compromised or lost. He doesn't want
More division.
snarky comments about them
Yeah.
from one group to the other, back and forth, and you could start on either side and go to the other direction. And so he seems to be working to try to, I think, maybe I'm too defensive for Paul, but I think he's been relatively clear. He just wants them to do what comes from their heart and to give voluntarily, but he wants them to get organized and do what they're going to do, and to do a good job and to be generous. But they still have choice and freedom of will. So whether it's just and you didn't say just, you said a good management model. I think it's a pastoral care kind of thing. How can I make sure that there doesn't end up being a sense on one group of these about the other one having failed to come through, and we got buffaloed in this, we got manipulated, we ended up being sacrificial and they didn't. That's not fair. All those kinds of things that we say in the life of the church when we compare ourselves with others. So maybe he was wrong to have started the whole thing, but once it got rolling, he's trying to make sure it doesn't get out of hand and doesn't become harmful. Mark?
Thank you for reminding me that this was an honor-shame culture, because actually when Paul was reporting to the Macedonians what he had heard from the Corinthians, because he does talk about asking them to do what they had promised, that was a way of honoring them. And I guess he was just letting them know that he had reported what he had heard, and he had honored them for their eagerness, and now people were coming, so let's be ready.
Yeah, let's live up to it.
So that kind of turned it from, in my mind, from being manipulative to being really culturally appropriate, because he's honored the Macedonians to the Corinthians. What he's saying here is he's also honored the Corinthians to the Macedonians, and he's given them, he's bragged on what they had promised to do, and so now he's giving them fair warning. We're on our way. They couldn't look on Facebook to see where they were. And so he was saying, so I'm coming with the Macedonians, but I'm sending the brothers there
To help you.
as kind of a foretaste or an earnest, so I'm really coming.
And back to John's, so make sure the house is clean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. One last thing on, Gloria?
To me, it seems like it is a real vivid example of good leadership, laying before the group what the goal is, and that encourages them to go on and do what they need to do. It looks to me.
Okay. Well, I'm being a pro-Paul guy, but I think so too. Just one last thing on verse 5. The word bountiful gift and then voluntary gift. Both translate a single Greek word, which normally we translate with blessing. So Paul is calling the Corinthians' participation in the offering blessing. What's the significance of that? To arrange in advance for this blessing that you've promised, so that we may be ready as a blessing and not as an extortion.
I would a lot rather have a gift and was given to me voluntarily than one that someone forced on me. So it's a compliment in many, many ways.
Tiffany?
Well, it's gonna be a blessing to them as well. When you give,
Right.
you're blessed.
Right.
Because you are thinking of others or loving others or whatever, that we are blessed when we give.
Okay. Yeah. The word blessing, I've written it there, eulogia, has two roots. It means a word good, a good word. A word that causes good to happen, that brings good into reality, that speaks goodness into existence. And so I think the offering does that in multiple directions. It speaks good into the Corinthians' lives. It speaks good into the Judean brothers who are hungry's lives. It speaks good to the Macedonians' lives. It speaks good to the picture of the church that the world gets. There's just blessing all around. And it seems to set up a new direction in thought that he's going. And let's at least read the next section, verses 6 through 11.
The point is this: the one who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and the one who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each of you must give as you have made up your mind, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to provide you with every blessing in abundance, so that by always having enough of everything, you may share abundantly in every good work. As it is written, He scatters abroad, He gives to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing, and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way for your great generosity, which will produce thanksgiving to God through us.
The one who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. The one who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. What does that sound like? Yeah, thank you. He shifts to an agricultural image, which is not overly common in Paul. His metaphors usually come from the military or from athletics. And here's a farm metaphor that Paul uses. Apparently a fairly well-known proverb, if the commentaries are to be trusted. Several of them mentioning Cicero's, as you sow, so shall you reap. We got saying something like that too, I think, even in our proverbial culture. But what I wanted to mention is the word bountifully here, twice in verse 6. The Greek, again, is blessing. The one who sows either for a blessing or on the basis of a blessing will reap either for a blessing or on the basis of a blessing. How does planting and reaping on the basis of blessing impact the way we would understand their participation in the offering?
Yesterday I read an article about seeding for grass. And it says rake it up and then pour your seed on it. And then you will end up with a beautiful lawn in spring.